Welcome to Intuitive Transformations with your host, Sylvia Henderson, and discover tools, wisdom, and inspiration that will empower you to transform your life. Sylvia is an intuitive life coach and energy healer with a growing practice that is focused on empowering others to be more of who they want to be. For the next hour, join Sylvia and explore and unravel anything in the way of you creating the life that you would love to live on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Well, hello and welcome to the Intuitive Transformations radio show, where you will find tools you can use to change and transform your life right here on the OMTimes radio network, the voice of consciousness at OMTimes.com. This is Sylvia Henderson, your host, and today is Sunday, October 23rd, 2016, getting ready to have a big election very soon. For those of you who are new to my show, I'm an intuitive life coach and an energy healer, and I live in Kirkland, Washington, which is not that far away from Seattle. If you would like to learn more about me and the work that I do, please feel free to visit my website at intuitivetransformations.net. That's intuitivetransformations.net. Being that we are almost at the very end of the month of October, I want to remind you all that listen to my show on a regular basis live, that beginning on Thursday, November 10th, the Intuitive Transformations radio show is moving to a brand new day and time. Starting on November 10th, this show will air live at 2 p.m. Eastern, and for those of you who, like me, live on the West Coast, well, that translates into 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And, of course, you can still find all of the recorded podcasts for my shows right here on OMTimes.com in the radio show archive section. And you can also find me on iHeartRadio, iTunes, SoundCloud, Intuned, and YouTube. Something else I'd like to share with you all is that I'm teaching a brand new online class called Pendulum Magic 101 on Thursday. That's this Thursday, October 27th, on the OMTimes Experts platform. Now, last week, I made a big mistake, and I gave out the wrong time for the class. So I'm here to apologize. The correct time for this class on Thursday is 4 p.m. Eastern, which is 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, this is a 2-hour online interactive class where I will teach you the basics on how to use a pendulum safely and with confidence so that you can rest assured that the answers you're getting are accurate. In this class, I will teach you how to connect with your higher self and how to only work with high vibrational unconditional love. That's very important. We're going to cover quite a bit in this class, including how to hold your pendulum so that your answers come a lot faster, and how to use your pendulum to also balance your chakras. Everyone can use that information for sure, and it's not going to be a class where you'll be working on other people. This is really for self-awareness. This is for you to how to use the pendulum in your own personal life. I'm also going to do some clearing work for those who are in the class to remove any obstacles or energy blocks that might be holding you back from fully accessing your divine intuition while you're using your pendulum. Now, this is going to be a really fun class, and I'm excited about it, so I really hope that you will join me on Thursday. Tuition is only $22, and to register for this class, you go to experts.omtimes.com. That's experts with an S, .omtimes.com, and the class is Pendulum Magic 101. You can also join Belinda Womack and myself for next month's Awaken Your Inner Alchemist group healing call, if you feel so inclined. And this is just around the corner on November 6th. To learn more about Awaken, visit my website at intuitivetransformations.net and check out my healing audio products as well. There's Forgiveness Heals, which is an audio healing that allows you to step into the energetic vibration of forgiveness for yourself and for others. And I also have a brand new audio healing called Wealth Attunement. And this comes with an extended version that you can use at night while you're sleeping, and also a shorter version that you can use as a guided meditation. Today, we are going to talk about something that is really important now that I've gotten all of that information out of the way. We're going to talk about the art of listening. You would think that listening is something that everyone just naturally does, but as you know, oftentimes, how many times have you felt unheard? How many times have you felt misunderstood? Because good listening, quality listening, effective listening is really a learned skill, and it's something that my guest knows quite a bit about. Joining me today is Leslie Shore, and she has made it her mission to teach others how to be effective listeners and how to identify what may be holding them back from listening effectively. Leslie is a national speaker. She's a communication expert. She's an author, and she is the owner of Listen to Succeed, a consultancy, my mouth's not working today, folks, a consultancy that focuses on using listening analytics to help clients achieve their highest level of effective communication. Her book, Listen to Succeed, and its companion listening analytics tool called Listening Effectiveness Profile is used in universities, in businesses, and nonprofits throughout the United States and in Canada. Applying the wisdom earned from over 15 years as a professor of communication, Leslie has developed a four-pronged communication methodology that she uses in her work with individual clients and as a speaker, consultant, coach, and facilitator for corporations, nonprofits, health professionals, and educational institutions. Issue analysis, critical thinking, values analysis, and appropriate communication approaches is everything that she brings to the table. Leslie's articles and expertise have been cited in several prestigious publications, including the Washington Post, Fast Company, Scientific American, Well-Being Journal, and the New Spirit Journal, and she is a regular on TV and talk radio nationwide. Leslie is the one-stop shop for communication issues that affect the bedroom to the boardroom. I love that. Family and team dynamics and contemporary communication issues. Leslie Shore, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Boy, that's quite the build-up. I hope I can reach what your listeners are expecting.
I'm sure that you will do that and so much more, because this is really your passion. And whenever someone has a passion, you can always talk about this forever, right? Because this is, the importance of this, the value of this, and that as a society, this is something that it's not taught in schools. I mean, maybe at the higher level, but as we are younger, how to really listen to one another. We're taught to verbalize, but we're really not taught what does listening mean. It's more than just having your lips closed together, right? There's a lot more going on to listening than meets the eye.
Absolutely, and you're right. It is a passion. It's a passion because I was so lucky that my grandmother and her daughter, my mom, and my dad were all superb listeners. And I grew up in an environment where I really was heard and listened to from a very young age. And as I even got to high school and college and working, I realized just how lucky I was to have grown up in that environment, because it simply was not the norm. And I couldn't understand why people couldn't listen to each other well, and I couldn't understand why people got into conflict so easily. And that's why when I decided to do my master's, this was the area I chose to get into and really research to find out, wow, what is getting in the way of people effectively listening to each other?
You know, and this is, I love how you pointed out the conflict that comes from just not being heard. You know, it's remarkable that when someone really feels authentically seen and authentically heard, how that changes the dynamics, even if they are at odds with another person.
It is kind of amazing that two things can happen. You can really be at odds with someone, and if you're effectively listening, you can pull the emotion out of it and try and get down to what is really at the core. Conversely, you can actually be having a great conversation, but because you're not really effectively listening, something someone says to you either hits you wrong or they can tell that you are not listening, and all of a sudden the conversation turns and you have absolutely no idea why, and you begin an escalation that you have no clue where it started. So listening in both cases really, really, really is important for relationships of any kind.
That, you know, I totally agree with you, because I've had client after client, and it's really interesting how much of the core issue has to do with just, I've never felt heard. So conversely, I'm not even sure how to listen. So when we return after the break, we'll discuss this brand new book by Leslie Shore, Listen to Succeed, and learn more about how to identify and overcome barriers to effective listening. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
There is no death, only a change of worlds. Chief Seattle. Deborah Livingston is an award-winning intuitive psychic medium whose international services include mediumship, spiritual assessment, animal communication, and spiritual mentoring. She is a published author and a trained shaman. Deborah provides evidential messages from spirit and departed loved ones. Learn more at deblivemedium.com. That's DEBLIV medium.com.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
When I was little, I didn't talk for a long time. I was sensitive to lights and sounds, so I built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. Sometimes I did the same things over and over, until one day I found out I had autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. This is Sylvia Henderson with the Intuitive Transformations radio show on OMTimes.com. And I have with me my guest today, Leslie Shore, and we're talking about how to listen to succeed. So, Leslie, before we went into the break, you shared about how you, at a very young age, you grew up being heard and felt listened to. And so this gave you a unique perspective when you saw other conversations or forms of communication happening where obviously people were not participating in that listening component. It was more all about the talking. So, which creates conflict when people don't feel really heard. So, Leslie, just as an overview, what is the difference between what most people define as listening or hearing versus effective listening, which you talk about in your book?
Okay, that's a wonderful question, Sylvia, and I think there are a couple of things that we have to understand, and the first one is that people do not realize that hearing is physiological. It's just the intake of sound. Listening is taking what is coming at you, either in words or in noises or even in a person's body language, because believe me, you listen with your eyes as well as your ears. And you take what's coming at you and you are processing it through every single minute of your life, through the knowledge, through the biases, through all of those things you have done and become to that moment. So everything that's coming at you, you're filtering in your brain in a nanosecond. And the issue really comes, Sylvia, when people do not realize that there are things that are getting in the way. And I call them barriers, and I'm sure we'll talk about them, but they're so invisible that we don't even know that they're there getting in the way of receiving what the speaker is intending to get to us, pure, unsullied by anything.
Well, since you've already kind of opened the door to talk about the barriers, would you mind talking first about the 4 major components of effective listening that you talk about in your book?
I'd love to, because to your point, listening and effective listening are different. When we talk about listening, a lot of people think about active listening and kind of leaning forward and showing the person that you're listening. And there's a component that is true with that. But here are the 4 pieces that I feel are really critical. And the first and foremost is being present. What's really critical is that you understand listening is about them, not about you. So it means being present 100% for the other person, almost putting yourself in their shoes. Being present means your mind isn't elsewhere. Being present means that you are not beginning to either tire of the conversation, and if you are, by the way, you have to let the other person know, because it's actually disrespectful if you don't. But being present is something that needs to be practiced, and it becomes easier. And I think we all have our own ways of being present, and we just have to practice it as we're listening. So that's the first one. Mm-hmm. The second one is, and this is really tough, taking in information from other people while being non-judgmental. Oh, boy, is that hard. We are
so
judgment
hard.
machines, yes. Yes. It's very difficult not to be judgmental. I mean, after all, we are who we are. We're human beings. We're wired that way. In a way, sometimes we have to make judgments for our own safety. But when we're in a safe situation in terms of a conversation, judgment needs to be held at bay. And there are ways of doing that. And when we talk about the barriers, a lot of that will come out. And the third one, which is really, to me, fun, is acknowledging the speaker in a way that has them continue the conversation, that makes them feel heard. So when you nod, when you smile, when you give great eye contact, when you kind of, that index finger goes up and is shaking and it's kind of like, oh, I'm excited about what you just said. Or that you're writing a couple of words down because you want to be able to come back at them with a question or a response, but you want to continue listening. Just make sure they know they're being listened to, especially with children. They know that they're being listened to, and they know when they're not. And
That's
the last
so true.
one,
That's so true.
Yeah. And the last one, I just want to get through the 4, and then we can really play, is, and this is from my grandmother, wait for the period at the end of the sentence before formulating a reply. How many times have we found ourselves, as someone is talking, going, oh, I know what I'm going to say, and start formulating the reply, not listening to the rest of what they're saying. And when they finish, you now respond, and you get totally embarrassed because they essentially said what you just said. It happens.
Well, that does happen. It happens a lot. Yeah, it happens in closer relationships, though, where someone who is speaking, the other person who's very close, like couples, for instance, they'll finish their sentence. And initially it seems kind of cute and endearing, but after a while, it can be kind of disruptive and a little bit annoying sometimes for people, I think.
Well, I don't think you're right. I know you're right. Because one of the things that always amazes me, Sylvia, is that people say, oh, well, when I'm at work, I really communicate well and I don't use sarcasm and blah, blah, blah. But when I get home, I feel like I can relax and I can say whatever I want. And I'm just sitting there and I'm trying not to say anything because of all the places to be the most effective listener and communicator. Family is the place to do that. And it's something
I totally agree.
Yeah, I want people to get out of that mythology because it really is.
It really is. It's like, and there is this kind of a mindset, even within psychology, that the people who are the closest to you are the ones that you tend to hurt the most because you let down all your guards.
And it's interesting when you say let down all your guard. When you let down all your guard, that feels to me that makes you personally vulnerable and open. Mm. But to me, that doesn't say that you can be sarcastic or throw stones and arrows at someone else. Or, and I think this is what happens, we become lazy when we're talking to family and close friends because we can't let our, quote-unquote, let our communication guard down. And yet, those are the people that will be hurt the easiest and will take the longest time to forget and even forgive. So the fact that listening effectively honestly takes a good amount of energy, it does get easier, and it's worth its weight in gold in terms of making a relationship deeper and deeper and deeper.
So let's talk about why is it that not feeling heard impacts us all so deeply?
It's really a question of self-esteem and self-confidence. When we are listened to effectively, we feel valued. And it's really interesting. Carl Menninger, a very famous doctor, said that listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. The friends who listen to us are the ones we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. And that's what happens when people are listening to you. And when it's the opposite, we don't feel valued. We don't feel heard. We feel less than. It's like you're invisible, and nothing that you say counts. Well, you and I both know that's not true, and we also know that people don't mean to have that seem to be the case. But that is indeed how, especially in children, especially in married couples, that is how it is received. At the very time and place where you need the most love is the time where, if you're not being listened to, you feel the least love.
That is so true. And gosh, in hearing you talk, I just really hope that if there's any teachers or parents that are listening to this show, that you will get this book, because that is so true. The self-esteem is built around feeling valued and not feeling heard, not feeling seen, not feeling important. You know, it doesn't prepare you for success in life. It really prepares you for looking for what's wrong with you, or how to fix yourself, or how to make it, how to figure out how to be heard. And quite often what people will do is, when they have not felt heard in life, they tend to be the overtalkers. They want to get they want to be heard, right? So they're overcompensating, kind of.
And that is where, as effective listeners, we can be people that actually boost a person's self-esteem in a way that they know that they are really being listened to in a number of different ways. And you can do that with an overtalker. And you can also train them not to overtalk, and they won't even know that it's happening. But if it can happen with you, they begin to realize that it can happen with other folks.
And that builds I love that. I just love that. So we're going to head into a break in just a moment. I want to remind everyone that we're talking to Leslie Shore about her book, Listen to Succeed. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hey, let me ask you something. Would you seat your 3-year-old child on a windowsill? Would you seat them beside a lit fireplace or by the deep end of a pool? One last question. Would you seat your child in a car seat that's not correct for them? Car crashes are a leading killer of children ages 1 to 13. Secure their future. Seat them in the correct car seat. For more information, visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And we are back, and we're talking about that it's not so much what you say, but rather how well you choose to listen. So, Leslie, with technology being what it is today, I mean, I grew up in a time when cell phones were sci-fi, and you were talking about how important it is, those early formative years for children, and as we grow up in our relationships with couples. How has technology impacted our ability to listen?
I would say that in the last probably 20 years, the advent of the cell phone, and especially in the last 10 years, the cell phone reaching all the way down into grade school children, has really made it quite difficult for our upcoming and already in the millennial generation for them to really understand, even at a very basic level, what listening is all about. And it pains me when I go into a restaurant and I see two parents and two kids around 7 to 14 years of age. All four of them have their cell phones out, and they're at a restaurant. And it really begins to tell me that one of the things that will be important going forward is for parents to set some ground rules about cell phone usage when the family is together, because that is such rich time where you get to debrief on the day and to get to know each other in a different way and to learn. But that time is gone if the cell phone is front and foremost, even at the dinner table. So it's a big issue, big issue.
It really is a big issue, Leslie, because, I mean, we've gone from an era where families did sit down at the dinner table and they did talk about their days, everyone, and they all ate together, to where people were eating at different times. And now when they do come together, they're not present with each other. Like you said, they've got their cell phones or their tablets in front of them. The kids have headphones on. No one even talks in the car anymore because everybody's clued into their device at some level. So it is really an interesting society we're building.
It's amazing to me. I saw an ad for a car, and I can't remember which one, where it has the device built into the back of the driver's and the passenger seat, so the kid can watch whatever they want to watch. And all of a sudden, that wonderful game of who can spot the license plate from different states, who's going to win that game, it's gone. So there's no interaction whatsoever, and that's irreplaceable in terms of time, in terms of kids actually understanding that they can have time with their parents, because it seems like all this electronic stuff is from dawn to dusk. When do you get a chance to talk to your parents?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really interesting. We are a community of individuals isolated by our technology in many ways. So you point out in your book that there are two primary obstacles that prohibit us from being effective listeners. One is the external listening barriers. The other is internal listening barriers. Mm-hmm. So can we talk a little bit about the external listening barriers first, and then we'll talk about the internal?
Sure. I remember with a smile that when I was creating my listening effectiveness profile, of course I had to try it out on some people and test it, and I sent it to my folks, and I got a call from my mom, who used to be an English teacher, and the first words out of her mouth that I heard were, "You pegged me." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Your assessment works. You pegged me 100%. I have an external factor, and I also have an internal." And the external factor was that visually, if someone was in her line of sight or something was going on, she would lose her focus. And I started to laugh because I realized that was mine. When I teach, I cannot be looking through windows. When I'm at a restaurant, you better have me facing the wall, because I lose my focus if I'm facing into the restaurant. So the external barriers have a lot to do with visually, where's the best place for you? Auditorially, in terms of how well you can actually hear, in terms of physical, Where do you need to seat yourself? I personally have to sit either front and center or as close to the center as possible, because I know this sounds strange, I actually have hearing loss that came on the last couple of years, and I really need the assist of seeing the speaker's lips. You cannot listen effectively if you are physically uncomfortable. And that can be anything from it being too cold in the room to the chairs, like in those conferences, are hard as a rock. If you're uncomfortable, you cannot listen effectively. And as I've said many, many times, the brain can take in only what the bladder can endure. So you really have to take care of Mother Nature. But that's kind of where the external stuff is. And I've actually, in restaurants, I actually have walked up or asked the server and said, could you ask them to, A, either turn the music down, or B, take it off of the acid rock station. And it was hugely important, and most restaurants will do that. But I actually speak up because I'm responsible for my own listening, and this is one way I make sure that I can effectively listen to the person that I'm with.
You know, this is a little bit of a catch-22, though, because someone who has never really felt heard how it impacts their self-esteem might not feel really comfortable making such a simple request, you know, because they're thinking, well, maybe everyone else in the room really likes the music this loud, and I don't want to, you know, it's interesting what people will do to not advocate for themselves.
And Sylvia, I agree with you. It takes courage. And I can say to you that courage doesn't come easily. I think some of this courage has come as age and wisdom has come. But I think it's also it's good to know that that is something that you can ask. And if you get up the courage to do that, you have actually done two things for yourself. One is you succeeded in something that you thought you wouldn't have before, because listening to the other person is so important that you are going to ask for them to turn the music down. And you succeeded again by actually being able to listen to the person that you are having a conversation with. But it comes with time, and it comes with courage, and sometimes that comes with age. And I agree with you. It's not easy.
But the value, the payoff is priceless, really, because you're creating relationships when you listen effectively that last much longer.
Yes,
when we don't.
And I have to tell you that my folks were married for 54 years before my dad passed. So when I say that effective listening is good for long relationships, I am not kidding.
I love that. That's beautiful. So there are 7 internal listening barriers, and I know we're going to head into a break in about 5 minutes, so maybe we can do the first 3 or 4. I know that the first one is judging and weighing, and maybe we can talk a little bit, because each one of these has other attributes or other ways that this may show, many ways this may show up. Like in judging and weighing, there's comparing, biased listening, and some others, power and control, emotional triggers, performance anxiety, hit or miss listening, language barriers, and lack of focus. So let's talk about that first one first, because that's a big one, judging and weighing.
Yes. So to make it quick and simple, we have a tendency to judge the person who is speaking to us based on what we are assuming about them. One could be age. One could be maybe they have a PhD after their name. One could be, boy, their clothes are just not put together. They're a little slovenly. So in our minds, we're making these judgments. And what is happening is at the moment you make them, that is a barrier to whatever that person is saying that is coming towards you. You've already made a decision. You're weighing what they're saying based on your assumptions about who is saying it. And a very famous story happened at Princeton. A gentleman went into this big lecture hall. It was open to everybody. And this speaker came in on the stage. Hair was rumpled, white shirt and khaki pants, probably hadn't seen an iron in a year. And the gentleman out in the audience said, "What is this guy going to teach us?" Well, the speaker opened his mouth and blew everybody away. And who was it? It was Albert Einstein. And it taught that young man, wow, I'm never making the mistake again of making an assumption about what the person is saying based on what I am assuming as a result of my biases or what that person looks like. So that's judging and weighing in a nutshell. Are you still there? Hello? Shoot. Okay. All right. So the second one then is power and control. And there are so many times that people are unaware that they're doing this. And power and control pretty much comes from the family dynamic that you have come from yourself. If both the father and the mother felt that the only way that they could keep control was to be the speaker always, then that sometimes comes down to the children, and that is the way they take on how to communicate. And so if you have the power and control barrier, it is probably coming out of the family dynamic that you watched as you were growing up as a child. So that's the second one. And the third one, and perhaps I'll just do a moment on that before the break. The third one is, emotional trigger, and we'll do that after the break.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hello and welcome back. And I have to say, Leslie Shore, thank you so much for being a co-host on the show. I got dropped off, but you were still there, so I'm so appreciative that you were able to, hold the fort down in the meantime.
Oh, life happens, Sylvia.
Life does happen, and that's just a wonderful thing. Before we go into the rest of the internal listening barriers, can you please tell everyone how they can find you and how they can find your book and your profile also that you offer online? Yes.
So at listentosucceed.com, you will be able to find the book and the profile, and if you get both together, you actually get quite a bit of a discount, which is really nice, actually. And the profile is actually electronic, so you will be able to take it and get immediate results. Those results, once you get the book, you will be actually able to find out what within those 8 major barriers is causing the issue, because there are about 37 minor barriers, and some of a barrier will apply to you and some won't. But boy, oh boy, when you find it, it's amazing to be able to do that. So listentossucceed.com. The book alone is also available at amazon.com.
Awesome. Beautiful. So before we went into the break, you were talking about judging and weighing. And did you get to power and control?
I did. And one of the things that was interesting, and I'll just recap in one sentence, power and control 9 times out of 10 comes out of the family dynamic that you were exposed to as a child, where one or both parents felt that the only way to have control in the relationship or the situation was to be the talker, and they would do anything they could to get back the floor and be the person who was talking. So they were listening for that way of getting back in.
Wow. That happens a lot in conversations when they become heated, especially.
And that's one of the reasons we don't want it to get heated.
Exactly. So what about the emotional triggers?
This is the biggie. We have lived a life. I don't care how old you are or how young you are. You already have lived a life, and things have happened to you. And words have taken on meanings, and they have taken on emotions, and folks out there don't know that. So I'm going to give you a quick example. When I was in 4th grade, a 4th grader, as 4th graders will do, called me ugly. I internalized it, never told it to my folks, kept it with me for years until a group of people disavowed me of that myth. But at the time, anytime a person used the word ugly, I would go off in a rant in my head. Don't they realize ugly is on the inside, not the outside? Use homely, use plain, use anything but ugly. So I would say that in my head. So I've lost a good 15 seconds of listening to someone. Once I learned what that word was doing to me, I made a conscious choice to not have it have that effect. I would push it aside, and it took practice. But we all have words like that. And we all have subjects that we do not want to talk about. And so when those get broached, it pings us and we stop listening. And one of the things in my book that I suggest is do a list of 10 words or 10 subjects that make you see red, that make you stop listening. Figure out how old you were when it happened and what the situation was. And then look at it and realize, wow, at age 10, someone called me ugly. So when I'm responding as a 10-year-old. It's a very powerful way of taking some of these words and kind of putting a pinprick in that balloon and having them lose their power.
You know, there is something just so healing, and this is part of the work I do, and I know some other healers that do this as well. Working with that inner child is so important because that's where we store our old wounds that we've been trying to hide from the rest of the world. And one of the things that can trigger anger is someone comes close to that wound. And just as you said, Leslie, it's as if you're back at being 10 all over again. And that rush of emotions that you were feeling then in that moment are just physiologically recreated in the present time.
Exactly. And the poor person across from you doesn't even know it. How are they supposed to know that that particular word is one of your trigger words? And so it's important for us as listeners to know what those words are. So when they come at us, we can make the choice to push it aside and keep on listening. So as you assumed, those emotional triggers are a huge issue.
Really big. Performance anxiety.
That's a quickie. Performance anxiety is very simply this. You think you are going to forget what it is you want to say, and therefore you start rehearsing, and the moment you start rehearsing, as we talked about before, you stop listening. I carry a little spiral notebook everywhere I go, so when someone is talking and they say something that I want to respond to, I just put down a couple of keywords, what they said, so that I can respond to them by saying, hey, you said X, 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 and that makes me feel, or that makes me think of, and then you're off and running. They feel heard, obviously, because they're using their words, and they truly were listened to the end of their sentence. The one I really want to get to, the most important, and I know where our time is language. Remember I said that my mom said external barriers is one, and her second one was language. And she's an English teacher. And so I said, Mom, what was it that got you? And this is so true of teachers, trainers, educators, you name it. They feel they should know that vocabulary word. They feel that they should know what that metaphor is. And when they don't, instead of listening or asking a question, they start trying to figure it out from the context of the sentence. So they're lost. And they feel to a degree ashamed of raising their hand and say, could you rephrase that? I'm not sure I'm getting it the way you said it. The funny thing is, and this is what's interesting, Sylvia, is when you have the courage to do that, to say, hey, could you rephrase that? I'm not sure what that means. You are the hero in the room. I can tell you that in a lecture hall, when you say that to a professor, everybody's going, oh, phew, I'm glad I didn't have to ask that. So you do two things. You learn something new because the person's going to tell you what it means, and that person who said it says, oh, my goodness, not everybody knows what that means. I ought to explain it better the next time I use it. So you've honored the speaker, and you've honored yourself.
So important. And a lot of this does take courage, like you mentioned earlier, raising your hand and being willing to say, I don't understand, and knowing that that's okay. I mean, I've always come from the point of view that the only bad question is a question that's not asked.
Absolutely, Sylvia. And what's really interesting is that when you say, I don't understand, I really have seen it in a speaker's eyes that, wow, they care enough about what I'm saying or what I'm trying to get across to put themselves out there and say that I don't understand. That is a really cool thing. And I think when we talk about self-esteem, as a listener, you just gave it to the speaker.
That's huge.
Yeah. It is.
That's really huge. Yeah.
And if you think about it, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. If you think about it when it's a couple talking, or you think about it when it's a parent and a child talking, one of the critical parts of communication is word choice. And when you add that to, and to me, eye contact is physically the most important thing. When you add that to eye contact, if the child or the spouse in that situation, whichever situation it is, if the child or the spouse has that look in their eye where, oh, I don't understand, or I'm confused, or you can see the beginning of something other than understanding, you can ask for a do-over. You can say, is there something that I said that's making you feel uncomfortable? When you ask that question, again, it is honoring the other person, no matter what age they are. Age 8 to 88, you are honoring the other person by asking them if you've said something that is making them feel uncomfortable, or is there a word that you don't understand. But you only get that if you've got the eye contact, and you only get that, and this is something, Sylvia, that I tell folks all the time. When you are debriefing with your significant other or your children, everybody deserves a sit-down time in a place away from electronics that's their time with mom or their time with dad or their time with the spouse. That even the kids know that they can't come in until that time is over. It can be 5 minutes, but boy, oh boy, the relationship deepening that goes on in that 5 minutes will help you when that kid turns 15. I can tell you that for a fact.
Wow. Well, that is priceless information. Leslie Shore, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, please go out and get her book, Listen to Succeed, because it really is not so much what you say, but rather how well you listen. So thank you, everyone, and I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a beautiful, beautiful evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.